Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm excited to be talking to you on release day. So, what have you been up to?
Oh, I've been releasing an album. What have you been up to?
Not much. Thanks for asking. I really do like this record, though. Everybody's talked about the contrast of it, how it was a bit jarring the first time we heard it, and I know that's sort of been one of the big hooks of this. As I read more and more about you explaining this, I love how you talk about that the sound was made judged on how the song was to be delivered. And how do you feel something like that out? I mean, where does that conversation start? Did you understand what this record was actually going to be like before you started the sessions?
Not sonically. Like, I wasn't aware of how it was going to end up sounding at the end. Sort of like, when someone's baby's born, they're going to look a little like the mom and a little like the dad, but you're not going to necessarily know what that face is going to be until they're in front of you, Mm-hmm. I mean, it was, the parts were, I knew what the makings of it, the structural makeup of it, but how it ended up sounding was, it was a little bit like at the end, oh, hi, that's how you sound, okay. That wasn't the primary concern.
Well, it's interesting because, the bare bones of the music really does convey your emotions on this, and that's usually the lyrics that are, the catalyst or the the automobile or whatever you want to say there. They further your point, but it really does feel like the sound is just as important for getting the point of the song across this time. And I guess that's why I love it so much too.
Well, great. I mean, I think that the way it ended up sounding was a necessary, like you said. I feel that the material and the sort of thematic meaning or what I was aiming at explaining or not explaining or talking about, the choice of instruments was always a direct reflection of that as the main motivation,
And what about the collaboration?
Which I guess should be the case. It should be the case, right?
It should be the case, yes. It's not always the case.
We need a drummer just because there's always got to be a drummer. It's like, that wasn't the way we approached it.
That is the way most bands approach it too. They don't put that type of thought into it. And that's the other thing, when you hear the song, because the first song we heard with Pleasure and even Century, when you get those songs out there, it's one thing. But this is one of those records that makes much more sense as a whole than just with, here's the single.
In choosing what songs to begin with, there was no thought of single. I mean, I don't feel that that's a world that this record belongs in necessarily. And it was more like, what's the first song to enter people into this album? You know what I mean? It was like, what's a good introduction? And in a way, Pleasure is the first song on the album, so it was the first song we put out, and that was the main thought behind it, is sort of what's the gateway, what's the door you're going to go in, and the hope is you go in and into the entire album, you know what I mean? Because I feel that it's difficult to pluck single songs out of, I mean, I guess they can survive on their own, they're resilient enough to survive on their own, but the hope would be that one song would lead you to the rest.
There's one song towards the end that I wonder if I'm reading into a little bit more than I should, because just the title alone, I'm Not Running Away, seemed like the perfect statement, for the time spent gone and what this record meant to you. And I guess that's the question. Am I putting something there that's not there, or is that something that you can also use in multi-dimensions?
Probably both, but there is some lesson in staying, in staying and sort of taking a good look and feeling the scope of whatever it is you might tend to want to run from, that actually, and in you're the typical thing when you're having a dream and something's chasing you, the moment you turn around and face it, then it kind of evaporates,
And the importance of collaborations. I'm looking at the few people that you've worked with on this record and thinking, again, when I listen to it, it just sounds so personal and sometimes brittle and sometimes very strong too. But, when you're collaborating with someone, I don't know, it's like giving some of your soul to another person to handle with something like this. Yeah.
So it's lucky that I also have their souls. I mean, the two main people that I made this record with are people that I've worked with for, Renaud Letton, he made Let It Die with me before I even knew we were making an album. I was just demoing with a couple of friends in Paris in between other things. It was not really a thought in my mind. I think in a way he knew of it before I did, Mm-hmm. And the thing that I have over the years recognized as and identifying for me like almost like a fingerprint of what I do has been made by him. It's been created by his mixes and his choices and his engineering and, production choices. And that's been like such an embedded collaborative, like sort of pivot upon which I've done everything I've done, that, a person like that, or like Maki, who played all the instruments with me. And similarly, I've worked with a lot, and we've done a lot over all the albums, and on his albums, I work on his albums. It's like that thing when you're with someone you know so well that in a way you're almost alone still. There's just a zero self-consciousness and a real symbiotic kind of co-owning of every decision. And yeah, so very few people, but like of a very deep understanding.
Switching gears a little bit, you traveled to Africa at some point during all this. I guess I read a little thing about that, and I was sort of wondering if there was an impact on that trip, if that was more than just a tourist trip, if you were looking for something else as you're sort of getting away from the music game for a minute.
Yeah, checking in with what real life is, you mean?
Sure. Well, I don't, Africa isn't even so much real life to me. It's a storybook to me, but yeah. I know. And it's so real when you're over there. It's like, oh, right, we presume this is reality, but there are so many versions of that. But I was so fortunate to go. I work a little bit with an NGO called Dignitas, who support all HIV and AIDS research and getting free meds to people and changing the stats in particularly in a country called Malawi. And a couple of my friends have been working with them for years, and they said, we go every year. You just need to come. You need to come and just like tuck in behind us and come with us around, and we'll, just sort of be a fly on the wall. So it was the ultimate invitation, to be able to be there to learn and be there to observe things and not be obliged to make not to know anything, and just to, it's better to introduce yourself to something so vast as an entire continent and not to presume to arrive immediately knowing what you're supposed to be doing, if anything, Yeah. So it was beautiful and humbling and massive and expanding, and I'm so grateful I got to go. It's something to shake you out of your shell of the home life, if nothing else. But to be part of a cause like that,
shake me out of my presumptions that I'm entitled to everything that I have, because it's just the luck of the draw that I happened to be born here, be born into the family I was. It's a privilege I had fresh perspective on coming back.
Yeah. Possible broad strokes aside, did any of that make it into the record? Was there anything about that sort of found itself on this record?
I went on a big trek at the end. I walked 100 kilometers with those friends on this big plateau filled with wild animals. It was beautiful. We walked for 5 days, and I think I was on those long walks, 8 hours a day in most stunning landscape. I think that I was, had a little notebook like hanging around my neck essentially, and was finding lyrics and working on lyrics as I walked, for sure.
Yeah.
Lots of time with nothing in the way,
So it's there. It's all there.
Probably.
Oh, that's so cool. I love the results. I'm happy you came back and did this and decided to keep doing this. I know that was,
thank you.
Was probably up for
good to be wanted.
Yeah, well, it's probably up for question for yourself for at least a moment there, from the sound of things. But I love what you're doing and what you've always done. So thank you so much for the album and for the interview today.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we will see you around.
See you around.
All right,
see
take
you,
care.
Louisville.
All right, bye.
All right, bye.